Okay, go ahead, please.
Okay, good morning, everyone. So let me introduce myself. So I'm Alphonsus. I'm the chair of the Regulatory Committee, ISPE Singapore affiliate. I'm also from Pfizer, GCMC at Pfizer office. I would like to welcome everyone from industries and agencies this morning to join our Technical Tuesday. So I believe this is the first time we have it in the morning. This morning we have Tim Watson. He will share his experience on coffee challenges and opportunities for inspections and regulatory approvals. Just a few reminders. This session will be recorded and posted on ISPE Singapore Affiliates YouTube page. And also there will be time for Q&A, comments, and discussions after Tim's presentation. Please feel free to use a chat function or unmute to comment or ask Tim directly after the presentation. It is an honor for me to introduce Tim. Tim is the global leader of Pfizer's CMC Advisory Office, a collection of global Pfizer technical and regulatory experts that provide guidance and direction to project teams to mitigate regulatory risk and integrate CMC policy with product strategies, while developing and advocating policy positions internally and externally in conjunction with QO. He has been instrumental in development and implementation of Quality by Design, ICH Q12, and continues to advocate for global regulatory harmonization and mutual reliance, serving as pharma representative to several ICH expert and implementation working groups since 2009. Please welcome and thank Tim for spending his insights and his evening with us. Go ahead, Tim.
Thanks, Alphonsus. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, I can hear you well.
Okay. Well, first of all, I want to thank you all for the opportunity to be able to share with you one chapter, shall we say, of the COVID challenges. And there's probably many of these I could share with you. It's quite ironic to be sitting here speaking to my computer and not being able to stand face to face with colleagues for over a year. It's been over a year since I have been on site in my office or traveling to meet with colleagues or agency colleagues or defending and discussing projects with agencies. And I never thought that I would see the day would be over a year for us to be working from home. But I, first of all, want to wish all of you a good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. And I also want to just wish you all the best through this pandemic as well. I hope you're all doing very well and safe. And there's a lot of optimism out there with the vaccines coming along. So the topic that I thought I would share with you today is really around opportunities for inspections and regulatory approvals. I'm going to take you on a little bit of a journey and share you a little bit of Pfizer's journey of this last year, not with respect to the vaccine, but with respect to things that we did not anticipate that would come up because of the vaccine. And I'm probably going to emphasize a little bit more around the FDA's journey. I think it's a good reflection of a lot of the things we've been working on. So I'll be a little bit more heavy on the FDA, but I'll share with you a little bit of what IFB is doing, some of the thoughts that we think that we could take away from this pandemic in terms of lessons learned, and some things that we as a global community commitment to health, not only industry, but also our regulatory colleagues can think about moving forward from this pandemic to continually look to improve our processes. So a little bit about the presentation. Roger Nozel, who was on the first slide, and I started collecting some examples within Pfizer of where we were running into issues with getting post-approval supplements approved or even pre-approval inspections. We started collecting some of our examples and some of our thoughts moving forward. So I want to thank Roger Nozel, who is my boss, but also a good collaborator for helping me put this together. And we gave we gave this presentation within Pfizer, and I think it caught some eyes, and we got the opportunity to share with it a little bit externally as well. So this will be the first time we've discussed this externally, so you all get to see it first. A little bit about this. So there is some urgency for authorization and approvals. The pandemic has really exacerbated the need for thinking a little bit differently and really the opportunity to reconsider some of the quality inspections. That's will be the focus of today, but it weaves nicely with just the importance of harmonization, global harmonization. You think of ICH and you think about inspectorates, PICs, and things like that. It really helps emphasize the need for a commitment for that moving forward. There's constraints associated with the pandemic that have disrupted our conventional inspections. There's no doubt about that. We see that, and you're going to see some examples of that. You're going to see maybe a little bit of a chronological order of how the FDA approached this, and where I'm very optimistic of where the FDA is moving, as well as a lot of the other partners. We say the boards of health have apparently adopted a risk-based prioritization approach. Now, that's a good thing. We kind of emphasize apparently because it's still a black box industry. We're not sure what is a part of their risk-based prioritization, what they look into, but we do see and are very optimistic of the fact that we're seeing a lot of movement in the area of prioritization with respect to inspections. We'd like to see some more transparency on that so we would know what we need to do to make sure that the regulators have the information they need to appropriately assess a site, and we're able to give them that information on a timely fashion. As a result of the pandemic, there's been several alternatives that have emerged. These can be waivers, postponements, delays, virtual inspections, and options, a whole variety of these alternatives that have emerged over the course of the year. And I'll share with you a couple of them that we've encountered at Pfizer. Excuse me, the pollen count in the United States is quite high, so I'm dealing with allergies. I think that industry also has a commitment to make sure that we leverage our quality maturity and our company's manufacturing facility systems to drive towards adoption. So I think we need to do a better job of sharing what we mean by quality maturity and what a good quality system means for a company. And likewise, as well as mutual reliance and recognition amongst the boards of health. And you can hear me say that a couple times this time during this talk about the importance of mutual recognition from the inspectorate side, but also I'm going to throw in a little caveat about some sort of recognition or reliance even from the review side. That we've learned a lot from this pandemic and trying to respond to global requests for marketing applications from every country at once for our vaccine has taught us a lot about the importance of harmonization and the need for harmonization. So the content, I'll share with you a little bit of the reality. What has the pandemic impacted on our quality inspections? From the Pfizer perspective, I'll share some things that have impacted us. Opportunity, what are some of the things that we as industry and some of our trade associations are trying to promote moving forward as a lessons learned, and acceptability. So how can we collaborate and work together to get implementation of these topics moving forward as well. So inspection, some of the experiences that we've had at Pfizer is we've had some remote virtual inspections performed at many of our facilities by EDQM in Europe, MHLW, PMDA have really bought into virtual inspections. There have been review of facility information and content. And we're going to think a little bit about that. That's not really an inspection, but it is a request for facility information to be sent to a variety of agencies for them to be able to assess some of the concepts at the facility or some of the data at the facility related to a product in lieu of the face-to-face inspection. So that's a good step in the right direction. And there's been even a case, and I say prior to X is a product for us, and I can't tell you what product that is, but I can say that product is a continuous manufacturing process, a drug product, solid oral dosage product. And we had originally set up for the FDA to come to that site to visit the continuous manufacturing facility to see the equipment. And PCM&M stands for Portable Continuous Modular Manufacturing, which is Pfizer's logo for our drug product continuous manufacturing suite. We have a facility in Groton, Connecticut, and we have a facility in Freiburg. And the FDA, we provided them with an opportunity to come to the facility to see that firsthand. And we had planned on doing that. They were planning on coming to our Freiburg facility, but unfortunately, the pandemic hit. Travel was shut down. I don't think many of us had thought we'd be sitting here a year later with the same issues. But we had to rethink that with the FDA. So we moved it to a virtual site tour where we took them with a video link into the manufacturing suite. And we were able to share with them in a very similar way that we would live, the live operation of the equipment at the facility. Now, that was a fantastic opportunity. And to date, even for that product, there has been no pre-approval inspection requested. So although this is not a formal inspection, clearly the knowledge that they gained during that virtual site tour seems to be sufficient enough for them to assess whether a pre-approval inspection is requested. So we think it's doable. We think that these virtual opportunities are very real and doable. And I think that, as I put this presentation together, daily things have changed in terms of guidance and comments put out by many different regulatory agencies. And I've had to modify the end of this slide deck to incorporate some of those new concepts, which I'll share with you. So sort of shifting over to Europe, there's been some good examples in Europe as well. There's a really good article in the Pink Sheet where the European inspectors have really, I would say they've been a little bit more proactive in embracing a lot of the virtual opportunities to inspect sites. And there was a good example in the Pink Sheet where I think they inspected a few sites in India and they were able to come up with some GMP observables. Christina Baccarelli sits with me right now currently on the ICH-Q9 EWG. She's with EduChem and she does a fantastic job, and she was a part of this article. But they have been sharing their experience with international regulators, including EMA, Inspectors Working Group. And there's a lot of interest in some of the new technology, like these virtual masks that you could wear and walk around a facility and you can see things in 3 dimensions. There's a lot of new things that are coming along and proposals out there that are of interest to a wide variety of agencies and industry. It's hard to jump on that as quick as possible during the pandemic, but we're optimistic that there's some opportunities in the near future. So EduChem was forced to do some out-of-the-box thinking, which is, I think, in light of the pandemic, we all had to do some out-of-the-box thinking. And it was really valuable to see that article and be engaged with them on multiple levels as well. So that's a positive step forward. I'm going to focus a little bit on the FDA key timeline because I think it really helps illustrate some of the challenges that we've had sort of in this journey as we move from March of 2020 to March of 2021. So we all know, at least from what hit home close to me, is March of 2020, the FDA halts all domestic and foreign inspections. In fact, that's the time Pfizer said, no more travel, you're done. I flew home from my last meeting with the FDA, I think on March 5th last year, and that's the last time I've been out about past Connecticut. In August of 2020, the FDA also published a document that has been revised multiple times, and all of the blue text on this slide that you see are the dates of the revision of this question and answers document. And this document is very valuable, and I'm going to show you a little bit of the evolution of this document because I think it's very positive in moving in the right direction from where it started to where it is today. But it was titled the Manufacturing Supply Chain Drug and Biological Products Inspections During COVID, Public Health Emergency Questions and Answers. And that actually started in August of 2020. And I'll share with you a little bit of the story of industry's reaction to that and some of the things that industry led by pharma actually took on to engage in dialogue with the FDA that resulted in the updates in January. And in fact, there was actually an update to that particular question and answer last week, which I've incorporated into the presentation as well. Also, I'll share with you a little bit about the April guideline or document that came out. which is titled Remote Interactive Evaluations. Now, when I say REI, that means Remote Interactive Evaluations. Oh, I think somebody needs to go on mute.
Nein, ich finde es ein bisschen lame, dass keiner die Kameras anmacht.
Can somebody please go on mute? Thank you. All right. So if you hear me say REI, that is, it means Remote Interactive Evaluations, and it was published by the FDA in April. And it was really a very good document talking about drug manufacturing, bioresearch monitoring facilities during the COVID public health emergency. And also there's another document that came out in May called the Resiliency Roadmap, and I'll briefly touch upon that as well as we walk through this. But I'll first start with some of the Pfizer experiences. So at the very beginning, and as we work through this passage, there's been some good things and some bad things. The pandemic impact not only impact all of us as people, but also in fact impacts our current portfolio. Yes, we were striving to get a vaccine and moving at light speed in that direction, but we also have patients to serve with our entire portfolio of products. So the conventional submissions and prior approval supplements were impacted. They were slowed, especially the ones that typically require some type of inspection. And we'll talk a little bit about those, and I'll show you some examples. The business impact, manufacturing site transfers and optimizations came to a halt for a lot of our products. You can imagine what that means for supply chain management and inventory. Generic and biosimilars are impacted. And there was really, when this first started, we couldn't put a connection between the manufacturing facility and the history of that. So we couldn't really figure out why the FDA was not wanting to approve these products, because some of the facilities had a strong history, GMP history, inspection history. It turned out that it's not about that. It's about challenges of being able to go and see the facility for the FDA, and I'll talk a little about that moving forward. But we do believe that it created opportunities for flexible inspection approaches. Now, this is just not Pfizer's position, but pharma really bought into this with industry and built this perspective up, and I'll share some more of that as well. But clearly accelerated submissions for innovative products had a lot of opportunities. So the inspections were really thought through and had some innovative ideas how to move those quicker. We need to keep the accelerated submissions, like for oncology products, were not held up. Inspection by proxy, so the ability to review facility information, but rely on other mechanisms and other ways to see that facility information. And then, of course, facility inspection history evolved into the equation as well, which is what we thought would be a good thing to add to that. So there's a lot of opportunities that we saw crop up early in this evolution. Now, this is sort of a pending application inspections, and believe it or not, I try to keep this updated daily, but it seems to be a moving target, especially with the recent Q&A update from the FDA. The products have all been blinded. I cannot tell you what the products are, but I can focus a little bit upon, shall we say, the journey of the regulatory action impact throughout this year. So we've received a variety of responses, such as action deferred until an inspection can be completed. What that means from our perspective is now we have to manage the inventory at those sites, and that becomes extremely challenging on a global perspective. An inspection of facilities required before the application can be approved is another message we received. This is for a site transfer or delayed until inspection. And then we started seeing a little bit more balance. FDA requested facility information in lieu of an inspection. So that's good. So now they're asking for information. Now, although we haven't received the PAI, we don't believe we're going to receive the PAI on some of these products, but there's no notification that says you're not going to receive a PAI. But the bottom line, it was for a new product, a BLA. They requested facility information in lieu of the application. There was a slight delay to that approval, but there was not a pre-approval inspection. There have been some outright delays and denials that an inspection of the facility is required before the application can be approved. But there's also been requests for GMPs at facilities for an NDA. So you can see the thought process is a little bit sporadic as to what's being requested, why it's being requested. The decision process as to what's being requested is sort of unknown to industry. There are some good stories as well. There's some stories where we had a site that had 5 post-approval supplements for 5 different small molecule products. It was delayed. We got the message, I think, last November that they were going to delay all the post-approval supplements for those 5 products. But recently we received information on that the inspection will take place on April 28th to relieve those 5 small molecule products and let them move forward. And I think a lot of that is tied into some of the chronological order history that I'm going to go through with the FDA's come up, which the thought process evolved in the right direction. We've had a couple areas where we've tried to put in some comparability protocols for changes. Those have been asked to be withdrawn, which would result in delay of transfers. GMP queries and even PAI waivers with approval have either come with yeses or nos. And I put this slide in just because we don't know what the regulatory action is going to be for the remainder of the year and next year. And these are just arbitrary products, but we do track them at Pfizer. And we also come back and track the existing products based on the current regulations. And this is a global effort in terms of what's being accepted from a post-approval supplement in which market, what supplies would be compliant, what supplies don't be compliant. It's created a very challenging time for us in industry from an inventory standpoint. And there is some risk to drug shortages. If we can't get these changes or site ups and running, we've had to have some dialogue around the impact of the products with respect to the patient's access as well, which is a tough conversation to have. So a couple of things we've actually bridged with the FDA. This is one example, a very positive example, which was our first sign that there's some good things moving in the right direction. It was during a dialogue with the FDA. I think it was a written dialogue back and forth during a product, and we asked the FDA, could CBER provide an update on the plans to conduct pre-approval inspections during the BLA review? If so, would these be done virtually? And the response we got back was very positive. We are waiving the inspections of all 3 facilities manufacturing sites at this time. Given the inspections will be waived, there will be no virtual inspection. And by the way, they comment that this is not an option for the FDA. I think the FDA talks about this as being virtual assessments. We believe there's a legal issue with the inspections versus assessments concept. And no records review. However, the decision to perform an inspection could change if significant issues or concerns are identified during the review process, though at this time a waiver is supported for all manufacturing sites. So this is a step in the right direction. This is our first really good sign. Going back and forth with the FDA on this product, up to this point, it was the facilities are going to require an inspection. Now, what the FDA saw from their perspective, what they have in their risk assessments that allow for this to take place is still unknown to us, but it at least allows us to understand that there is a mechanism in place for that to take place, and then a mechanism in place for a waiver to be issued if appropriate. So inspection alternates for consideration. You could have a waive formal inspection. You could postpone inspection until after approval. That's actually a concept that's very positive. A pre-approval inspection or a post-approval inspection. FDA has talked about that. Whether the inspection takes place at the point of approval or not, we think we would always welcome inspections. Virtual inspections via submission of quality of content review, or even a delayed approval. And I raised the question about what about mutual recognition? We know about PICs. We know about the mutual reliance in terms of inspections. And we think there's some value as we move forward in leveraging that mutual recognition and reliance, especially under a pandemic, to alleviate some of the challenges you can see with the backlog, at least in our pipeline of products. So collaboration and implementation. Industry then started coming up with some proposals. Pharma was the foundation of the framework for alternate inspection approaches to help alleviate some of the challenges that many companies were experiencing such as the examples that I showed you through Pfizer. Pandemic response and PDUFA, we are working at either direct engagement with the FDA for pandemic response or even through the PDUFA agreements that we're working this year as well. Again, in FDA in August of 2020, they came out with a question and answer. They revised it in January of 2021. And last week we received the final version of that Q&A, and I'll show you a little bit of the evolution of that. Pharma engaged with them. So the pharma GQM, which I represent Pfizer on, got together and started working towards a dialogue with the FDA, trying to put forth opportunities and suggestions for the FDA to move past this backlog and challenges of this pandemic. And to be honest with all of you, I don't think any of us, whether it's the FDA or industry, thought we'd be sitting here a year later, still working from our offices. So, you know, this has gone on quite long enough, and I think that many of us have to think outside the box. But pharma led the charge on engaging with the FDA about this Q&A, and I'll share a little bit about that. And we also feel that there are some subsequent opportunities that we move forward past this to establish a new normal. What can we learn from this? What are the right things that have science and risk-based risk assessments of facilities that might help move towards a new normal, whether it's a virtual inspection on specific topics or PICs or mutual recognition or reliance? We think that this pandemic has done nothing more than help illustrate even more so the importance of some balanced collaboration and opportunities to move this in the right direction. So the first FDA guideline, now I'm point to the upper right-hand corner. I'm sorry this is so small, but that's a snapshot of the front of the FDA guidance. And it was originally issued August of 2020, and it was updated. The first update that I saw was January 29th, and we talked about this. And actually, pharma put together a position paper, which I'll share with you a little bit about, and they engaged with the FDA on January 26th. The biggest concern in that original document that came out was question 6. It said, if my application includes sites that cannot be inspected, and it had a lot of discussion about that. But the biggest thing that caught industry's eye is the possibility where it said the FDA generally intends to issue a complete response, which is not a good thing. So a complete response letter would not be approved moving forward. And it became a little bit of an issue that if this becomes the one issue that holds up an approval is just because we can't inspect a site or assess a site, it seemed like there needed to be some dialogue to figure that out. So the pharma recommended the FDA to make every effort to conduct virtual inspections before the agency considered using complete response as an applicant. If the only basis for the complete response is an inability to conduct on-site inspections due to travel restrictions. So that we were really trying to focus on alternate innovative technology to at least initiate and get us through the pandemic or look for embracing new technology moving forward. Objects the FDA intention to defer action to application until an inspection can be completed. In cases where there is inadequate information to make determination of the acceptability of the facility. That's really the objects from the FDA's intention. So industry's proposal, and this actually started out at pharma, but there was a wide variety of other organizations that were working towards a similar solution. So a couple of different organizations were thinking about what's the steps forward, and pharma actually partnered with the groups up in the upper right-hand corner. And again, there was an industry proposal that we titled Risk-Based Approaches to Inspections and Records Requests During and After the COVID-19 Public Health Emergency. So it focused on during and after, and I focus on after because that links up to the new normal I talked about. What can we learn about moving forward? Improved communication was probably one of the things we discussed the most. The communication, as I mentioned, of understanding what the concerns were from the agency with respect to a facility was not transparent. So we really felt there had to be some improved communications. Inspection history and records requests, we supported that. the sites, something about the sites, what their inspection history was, or even requesting records. The industry is very open to that. Improve predictability, consistency, and transparency of pre-approval inspections is also very important. So pre-submission dialogue to establish criteria, notification of inspections and conclusions, process conclusions, but more or less getting feedback on what the FDA is concerned about so that we can either address it or engage in dialogue before we had reached the point of a complete response letter. And virtual inspections, and I bold that. Industry supports virtual inspections like the EDQM paper that was put out by Christina, and many other agencies have embraced and moved forward in the pandemic environment to use virtual tools. And of course, establish a waiver process. But the pandemic, I think, has created a lot of opportunities for the new normal moving forward. So then along came in April, a little bit after that. In April, this is a good thing that came along. I'll spend a little bit of time with this because this is the beginning of what I feel like is the FDA really moving to think about a way to deal with the backlog and to deal with this long-term effect of not being able to inspect facilities. They came out with the FDA's remote interactive evaluations guidance, and you can look this up on their webpage. And REIs are defined as use of any combination of various interactive tools to assess facilities. And I emphasize assess. It's not inspect the facilities, but it's to assess facilities. And we think this is a part of their risk assessment process as they look to understand and determine relative risks related to facilities, culture at the facilities, as well as the need or not the need to inspect. So RIEs are not voluntary. They're not inspections, but it does, quote, it feels like a temporary solution to move past the COVID inspection issues to industry. This is our interpretation, which is a good thing. It's an effort to figure out a way to move the needle in the right direction. So it's very much appreciated by industry. The one sad thing is you can't request for an REI. So you can't call the FDA and say, look, in lieu of the fact that we're held up and we can't do an inspection, could you come do a remote interactive evaluation? So that's clear in this document. However, I personally feel that it's a fair question to ask if you're engaging with the FDA to say, to at least ask, is our RIEs being considered in lieu of the COVID pandemic for our product? I think that's a fair question. It does include PAIs, PLIs, post-approval inspection, surveillance, et cetera. So that if you read this document, I've, of course, just captured a few bullets that have caught my eye as being inspirational, but there's a lot more to this document. It discusses IT platforms, what the FDA plans to use, its own IT platforms. We're concerned about cybersecurity these days. We're concerned about transmitting any type of information. So that's important, but it discusses that. FDA talks about how FDA will hold out closeout meetings after an RIE and provide sites with observations, issues, and reports to facilities. So that's the first step, as I talked earlier about improving communication. So there's a closeout meeting, a good dialogue back and forth. So that's really positive. Now the FDA inspectors will generally be the same to conduct the RIEs as well. That's good because the inspectors are the ones that have the most knowledge and information of what to assess at a site. And they're going to use these to meet their user fee commitments to update relevant internal databases. And as of March 2021, according to this document, estimated 68 applicants have been delayed due to the inability to conduct pre-approval, pre-market, or pre-license inspections. So these are called non-mission critical products, but we do believe that this RIE opportunity is a step in the right direction to break that backlog of inspections. So you can see the evolution, the thought of we're going to issue a complete response letter, moving towards a very innovative idea to come up with RIEs, move away from the concept of inspections to assessments, and a really very valuable effort to try to think differently to break this backlog and challenge during this pandemic. And also in May, there was and you can go to the webpage as well, it's called the Resiliency Roadmap by the FDA. It was put out in May 2021, just a few weeks ago, last week. This is really a sort of a roadmap of how to deal with the backlog. It talks about the different types of how they would rank products, what the tiers of those products might look like, mission critical, different tier 1 to tier 3 lower priority. It does pretty much rule out foreign surveillance of inspections required, but is not clear on pre-approval inspections for foreign facilities. So we're still working through what we mean for foreign surveillance of inspections. And the report outlines 3 scenarios of transitioning to standard operations, with the best case scenario allowing for assumptions of standards by May 21. So he's trying to standardize some of these concepts as well. But this is really trying to help figure out what to do with the backlog that has built up over the past year, and what that strategic roadmap would look like to get FDA to move forward and out of that. So that's very well received by industry as well. So then again, back to the guideline. The guideline that was issued in August 2020, which was updated in January, and now it gets updated on May 17th. So hot off the press for all of you tonight in this great sharing is, we'll revisit question 6. Question 6 was the one with the complete response letter. And, so we look at that now, and it says, if my application includes sites that cannot be inspected because of travel restrictions resulting from the public health emergency, will my application automatically receive a complete response letter? The answer to that has been modified. And the answer is no. FDA will not automatically issue a complete response letter if the FDA cannot conduct an inspection because of travel restrictions. So that's a little bit of different of tone. Decisions regarding applications will be based on the totality of information available to the FDA, including information obtained from use of the alternate tools described in question 5, answer 5, which is fantastic. That's moving in the right direction around assessments and thinking about ways to be able to assess facilities without doing site inspections. Based on an assessment of the product information provided in the application and based on the availability information about the facility site, FDA will take one of the following actions, and there's a few lists of what those actions may or may not be, but I'm not going to list them out. But the actions are good actions and things that they can actually think through to move the needle in the right direction. Worst comes to worst, instead of moving from a complete response letter, we think the agency is moving to more deferred action if you're clearly in the bucket of they need to inspect the facility. So that's a little bit better than a complete response letter. Although it's not perfect, but it still at least gives you a chance to defer the action instead of a complete response letter. So that's another slightly positive opportunity that came out in the updated question and answer. A couple other questions, and I'll jump around to maybe 2 more that I thought were really good, is how are inspections impacted by COVID-19? And this is getting into something we talked about. While inspections that can't be conducted by the FDA are limited due to factors including travel, the FDA intends on continuing using alternative tools when appropriate to evaluate facilities. This is a great comment in this question and answers. This includes requesting existing inspection reports from other trusted foreign regulatory partners. So here we are moving into that mutual recognition and agreements with other confidentiality countries, requesting information from applicants, requesting records directly from facilities. But what we really like about this comment is we think it's moving in the right direction for acknowledging the fact that reports from other trusted foreign regulatory partners through mutual recognition, the PICS mentality, we think is the right direction to go. So this is a good update to the last version of the question and answer. And also, how will travel restrictions resulting from the public health emergency affect my application? FDA is working directly with facilities to communicate issues identified through a review of records or information. The key word there is communicate. So for example, CDER and CBER regulated products intern process have been implemented to communicate with manufacturing facilities regarding issues identified following review of records, other than information. Responses from the facility regarding these issues will be feasible. be considered before taking action on a pending application. That last sentence is extremely important because it allows for a dialogue to take place, not just an issue of an observation, but allows the facility to respond and engage in a dialogue for these. And this is the communication part that we think is moving in the right direction as well. Now, sort of shifting away from the FDA, which we think is a positive movement in the right direction, when shifting back to Europe, FDA just came out with an annual regulatory GMP inspection survey data, which you can get off the web page now. And there's a couple of things that really support everything that I've mentioned before that pharma supports, FDA supports, is highlighted in yellow. So virtual approaches help as an enabler to have a role. Combined use of virtual on-site hybrid may be valuable. Follow clear defined schedule with inspection endpoints and enable waivers and recognition to use various tools. So IFBIA is very much in line with pharma in terms of where we think the solution is for the pandemic, but also the new normal. And I like this little scheme that they sort of put in place, talking about knowledge and trust, that when knowledge and trust are low, clearly an inspection is worthwhile and important. But as we gain in knowledge about facilities to do risk assessments and trusts around what those facilities and companies can do, there's the belief that there can be some recognition with waivers, less formal inspections, virtual, or even unilateral waivers through mutual recognition. So that little scheme there from IFBIA really sort of captures in a nice little illustration sort of what we'd like to see as an opportunity moving forward. So I commend IFBIA for this report that's come out. Now I'm going to share this. This is a very busy slide, and this is a Pfizer slide. We've been doing a lot of thinking around what have we learned from the pandemic, and I can probably spend hours with you talking about what we've learned around the pandemic. But we believe that there is a lot of opportunity, not only in the inspector front, but also in the review front, the front on new technology, the front on how can we get better harmonization and implementation of ICH guidelines, which have moved the needle in the right direction, but we're still seeing some divergence when we're dealing with so many marketing, different markets. Industry, we as industry, as Pfizer or any industry, we don't manufacture to a single market. I don't manufacture my product to the FDA's expectations. I don't manufacture the same product then to Europe's expectations. We manufacture to the sum total of every market's expectations out there. So if your market wants a tighter specification, or if your market won't allow for a technology transfer, it restricts that supply, not just for your market, but for all markets. So there's no better reason, I believe, that one thing that has to come from this pandemic is an improved discussion and dialogue of how to continue to work as a global community, a global industry community, and a global regulatory community to strive for some level of harmonization, same expectations of control strategies, same expectations of inspections, the use of virtual tools, the recognition of new innovative technologies for improved drugs, and paths for those to be approved quicker globally. We think that now is the right time to do that. And I'm not going to go through all the details of this slide, but we call this our new normal slide at Pfizer and CMC. Some things that we really want to try to impact as a result of the pandemic moving forward that we've learned from our vaccines and our therapies for COVID. You'll be hearing more about this as we engage with pharma on this and ISPE on this. ISPE has got a lot of thought ideas at the Regulatory Steering Committee and the Regulatory Quality Harmonization Council around what can we do past the pandemic to drive for the new normal. So that's a positive. I just want to share with you, maybe as a plug for something to think about in the future for ISPE to take on and think about. So we think, collaboration and implementation. So pharmaceutical companies manufacture for patients globally. Again, not to accommodate divergence across regulatory authorities. And in fact, with the vaccine, we can't accommodate those differences. We just can't accommodate them. We can't keep up with it. The global pandemic demands alternative approaches that warrant regulatory consistency, harmonization for applicants and inspections. I believe that this will be one of the things that come out of this as an important movement forward. And again, I'm going to come back and hound on mutual recognition and mutual reliance as being sort of the mechanism to solve this issue and relieve some of the stress. So with that, I hope to at least give you a little bit of a journey of, using the FDA as an example as to what we've been through over the year, as we all thought this would not be a long-term situation. But I like the fact it shares the evolution of the FDA's thought process behind inspections and where they're moving towards to help alleviate some of the issues. I hope that we can take something from that, as well as we learn from IFBIA and Europe as we move forward. And with that, I'll conclude and say thank you to Roger Nozel, thank you to Alphonsus, thank you to the ISP chapter, and I appreciate your attention.
Thanks, Tim, for sharing your experience on inspection. Is there any question for Tim? I don't see any question in the chat box. Perhaps I think if you want to ask Tim directly, you can unmute yourself.
Good morning, good day, everyone. This is Thomas from the ISPE. So first of all, Tim and everyone, apologies for crashing your presentation. And then I want to move on and say, Tim, this has been an absolutely outstanding, excellent summary of what's going on in the new world, as I prefer to see it. It's a really awesome job here. And I would also like to thank all participants who have dialed in. I've been going through this. We have more than 50 participants today, which is an absolutely extraordinary level for our ISP Singapore chapter. And I see lots of participants from outside Singapore, from the region. So really everyone welcome, and thank you so much for making the time and join. It definitely appears to be a very, very appealing subject, close to everyone's mind right now. So therefore, from my side, I would really like to encourage everyone, feel free to unmute yourself, to switch on your cameras, interact with us, interact with Tim. We have this fantastic opportunity here to all learn from each other. And what strikes me from the presentation here, Tim, is really that what you're saying is we're breaking down borders, frontiers, and we're looking at this all globally these days. And Zoom meetings by itself are already an evidence of that we are living and working without borders or frontiers.
Yeah, I agree, Thomas. In fact, I've been involved with ICH for well over a decade now. And I think that ICH is fantastic in terms of moving the needle and really setting expectations for global science and risk-based perspectives. But I don't think we can become complacent with it. I think the pandemic has really poked holes in some of the things that we have failed to recognize. I can tell you that when you try to file a vaccine to over 100 markets at once, and you're trying to deal with queries from 100 markets at once, you can't deal with them. And the expectation and what's being asked for is data you don't have, right? You're operating in a clinical IND format, right? So the fascination is there's ways to think through that. So with the right transparency and dialogue within the agency between scientists, you can evaluate the risk pretty quick and come to a good decision of how to move the needle in the right direction. What is right for patients right now that are suffering from this pandemic? Moving the needle in the right direction is important, and we wouldn't have the vaccine success that we've had today if we didn't have that dialogue. And it makes you wonder coming out of this if scientists can engage in that discussion and dialogue more in a transparent fashion. And I'm not suggesting, when I say mutual recognition, I don't believe that the FDA, we're not suggesting the FDA review an application that's approved globally. That's not what we're suggesting. We still recognize that the assessments needed to take place by different agencies. But imagine if you had some crazy idea of a cloud-based solution where you could upload your module 3 into a cloud, and there could be transparency amongst agencies. So one agency could see what the concerns are of the other agency and engage in discussion and dialogue in that fashion. Think about what that would mean in terms of just pure scientific discussion. We had a pilot program at the FDA, and I like to share the story because I think it's important, is we did a pilot program where we did the joint review with the FDA, Europe, and Japan. So we had an application. I think we're the only company that did this review. where we filed a marketing application for a product, and the three agencies reviewed it together. And what was fascinating about that review was the dialogue took place between the rapporteurs and the reviewers. It was them asking each other questions. Why do you think this is a good element of the control strategy? Or why do you think they need this specification tightened? And we just sat back and watched the discussion, because what it allowed for is it allowed for multiple scientists to bounce their ideas off of each other from from the agencies. It wasn't me trying to engage in a discussion and query process where they ask a question, and if I don't have the context, I reply, and I only got one shot on goal and I have to prove it, right? But that was fascinating. And I think that, you know, from a mutual, when I say mutual recognition, what I really mean is maybe mutual transparency, mutual work sharing, mutual scientific team engagement between agencies. Something like that might move the needle a lot faster. It clearly would have been beneficial for us in the pandemic, but we'd like to see that in the future, because as I've said before in this slide deck, we don't manufacture for any specific market. We manufacture the sum total of restrictions from all markets, and that becomes a restriction to innovative improvements for any product moving forward. So, you know, the idea there, my pitch sell to all of you, my sales pitch here is, you know, Thomas, is a great question. I think the idea would be, we can't give up on what we started a decade ago with ICH, and we need to make a commitment to keep improving on that concept moving forward.
Thanks, Tim. Tim, we have a few questions.
Sure.
The first one from Iris Co. What can industry do to build trust with the agency? Is getting no observations in the past inspection sufficient? Yeah,
you know, that's a good question. I'm going to be honest with you, I'll tell you what my personal perspective on that is. I think if I look at ICH, I think we have not done a very good job of, from an industry perspective, around what constitutes a good PQS, pharmaceutical quality system. As you well know, Pfizer has been through many mergers, and I've seen all different types of quality culture and quality systems. And what I've learned from my ICH colleagues that are from regulatory agencies is I've learned about the things they see from different industry and organizations. And there's a whole spectrum of different expectations of what a quality system and a quality culture means between different companies. And if you look at ICH, we talk about reliance on the PQS system, but we don't talk about what constitutes a good foundational PQS system beyond ICH Q10. It talks about responsibilities, talks about guidelines, talks about what to consider, but it doesn't talk about what that looks like. And I think that we can move the needle a lot in a lot of directions, especially with ICH Q12 coming along, is what constitutes fundamentally good, sound expectations for things like change management, for things like GMP and SOP development. And if we can engage in that discussion along the lines that we talk about marketing applications, I think it would allow for that trust to build, because now we're sharing with what a quality system should look like and should use to assure that, you know, our medicines, and we have control of our medicines. So that's probably the number one thing that would go off the top of my head in terms of building trust in the right direction. Likewise, as I've said in this presentation, and as we talk about on ICH Q9, even on Q9, we talk with the regulatory authorities around agencies being transparent around their risk assessments that they're using to assess industry. Because if we know what their concerns are and what they see from a risk standpoint, it allows us to improve our quality systems. So that discussion around being transparent around what constitutes a good pharmaceutical quality system, likewise, what agencies can do to be more transparent around their risk assessment systems and things they're looking for, I think would go a long way to continue to build mutual trust. And I think that trust is a two-way street. It's not only about trusting industry, it's also about industry understanding how to trust regulators as well.
Thanks, Tim. The next question that we have coming from Mr. Xia from HSA. A great presentation by Dr. Tim Watson on flexible and alternative approaches. From a CMC and GMP perspective, how can Pfizer convince potential vaccine, even doctors, that mRNA vaccines cannot cause genetic changes?
I'm sorry, the question a little bit, Can you repeat that?
Okay.
Person.
Thanks, Mr.
Okay.
Chair.
Yep. Very good morning and good evening to Dr. Tim Watson. I think your presentation was very insightful, giving the various alternative and flexible approaches. I mean, I've heard you mentioning virtual inspections, hybrid inspections, use of company facilities, history and information, and taking into consideration the quality, maturity of the company as well. And of course, you mentioned about mutual reliance and mutual recognition agreements. Actually, I come from an inspector background. I support all these approaches, which the industry are also looking at. But I actually would like to ask you a slightly different question. That is related to the mRNA nature of Pfizer's vaccine.
Right.
There are still quarters out there, potential vaccinees as well as medical doctors who still think that the mRNA vaccine can lead to genetic changes or even genetic damage. So from a CMC and GMP perspective, how can you allay the fears of these people? Thank you.
Well, that's a great question, and I'll do the best I can to answer it with what I'm allowed to say. Trust me, I think if you remember, people thought that the mRNA vaccine was injecting microchips into our body so they could track us, right? There's so many conspiracy theories that are out there with respect to this, and I see them daily, even not only I see them from my friends and family, and I scratch my head as a scientist and wonder how these come up. I really feel that from my perspective, we as scientists need to do a better job of getting out there and sharing what good science really means, right? So it's not a conspiracy theory. It's not injecting microchips. I see this all the time in the United States. People say that they're doing good science, and what they're doing is they're trying to prove something that they want to prove, and they don't have a theory. They're trying to prove something to make money off of it. So I don't know what we can do, from the GMP standpoint, other than continue to reinforce fundamental good science concepts. Teach, get out there and talk about the things that we do as innovative researchers to bring this along. But you got a great question that I'm probably not the most experienced to answer that question. I don't have a magic crystal ball to figure out how to convince people that the mRNA virus is not something that is going to genetically modify your body or inject a microchip into your body. That's nonsense. So I don't know the answer to that, other than I think we as scientists still need to keep pushing for good scientific concepts and principles. And somehow I think we got to figure out a way to engage that dialogue outside the scientific community at a more fundamental lesson that people don't understand science. So.
Thank you, Tim. I deliberately put the question from a GMP perspective is because there are people who, maybe it is actually a fact too, that the mRNA vaccine actually starts off with DNA.
Yeah.
So there is that. Are there any possibility of residues, even minute quantity, being not completely removed from the manufacturing process?
Well, you're asking the wrong guy, Rick. I'm not the guy that goes back that far. I'm a small molecule guy, not a biologics guy. First of all, I'm working on the lipid portion of the vaccine, not the biologics portion of that. But I would have to defer that to one of my mRNA expert biologic people, which I think you're may have on the phone here in a couple of weeks to have that discussion. But from the lipid standpoint, I get to engage with the small molecule manufacturing of the excipients of the lipids. That's been just as big as a challenge. But I'm not qualified to answer that question. So sorry about that.
Not a problem, Tim. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thanks, Mr. Shia. I think one quick question for everyone. Is that okay if we overrun the meeting by
Sure.
5 minutes? Yeah, I think the next question that I have is from Michelle. Michelle, do you want to ask the question directly to Tim, or you want me to read your question?
Hi. Sorry, let me put you on the other screen. And guys, about the hair, it's a bit messy because it's very windy here in Ocean Grove.
My hair is very messy as well.
And so we got some winds down here today. I'm near the beach in Victoria, and I spoke at the ISP Malaysia vaccine conference yesterday, and I prefaced it with and I was talking about vaccines, and I spoke a lot about what's happening in Australia and everything. I touched on the fact that, you know, information updates all the time, which you've pointed out. And as I wake up this morning, Melbourne has 5 cases and we haven't had any community transmissions for quite a while. So now Melbourne's going back into lockdown restrictions this evening. But my question is, and I spoke a little bit about this in my presentation yesterday, and a couple of the other speakers touched on it, about the request from is it the People's Vaccine Alliance about the temporary lifting of the IP waiver. And as they're touching on the interest of sharing information, and, you know, the fact that the vaccines were able to be developed very early on because the genome sequencing was was shared by the scientists in Wuhan. So everybody got a head start on vaccines, etc. I don't know if you're able to give your opinion on what you think about the IP waiver.
I can't, you know, that's a good question, because it's all over the news in the United States with, you know, President Biden as well talking about that. I'm probably not the right person to talk about the IP waiver. What I can say is this, just from a scientific perspective, I can tell you that that trying to get raw materials to make a vaccine against all the other companies that are trying to make vaccines is one of the major reasons why we have had such a slow, you know, our vaccines have not, it's not because we don't have facilities. It's not because we don't have capacity. It's because you've got to get the ingredients to put a vaccine together from hundreds of suppliers out there, right? So even if you give up intellectual property, I personally struggle with, everybody's going to be competing for the same raw materials. It's not going to change the problem. The facilities are not, we just don't magically have these raw materials on anybody's shelf. These are special raw materials being made specifically for these vaccines. And we have tried to ramp up that production, right? But that production still comes with limitations. Tech transfer is not something that takes place overnight. So, you know, my short answer to that off of my top of the head is I think that the mere raw material supplies is still going to be an issue whether intellectual property is released or not. And
I completely agree with you. No, I agree with you. It's I think the general public and developing and emerging nations want to see the willingness, but it's not really going to make any difference. I'm dealing with one particular client in Singapore at the moment, and they need to order their cleaning supplies or cleaning disinfectants, etc., from the UK, and they want to start their cleaning validation in June. It's like, guys, it's not happening. I don't even know if the manufacturer in the UK has your stock. And just one more interesting thing I like is about the LAL test. Uses the horseshoe crab, and it's not an issue at the moment, but it could be being pushed towards the endangered list because there's so many more endotoxin tests being performed around the world. So for me, this is the sort of thing that the general public need to know. They need to know it's not, you know, Pfizer's being greedy, J&J's being greedy. Actually, they're not. Let's look at alternative ways of getting companies to manufacture. But as you said, even if you're out licensed and all that sort of stuff, there's just not enough raw materials in the world, especially with India and their current situation.
But even if you did, let's hypothetically say you do release intellectual property, I mean, just the mere knowledge of transfer to bring another facility up to speed to manufacture this is going to be years. I mean, we're lucky because we have the facilities, we have the expertise, but to do a tech transfer of something like this is huge. The raw material, just trying to keep up with that has been a challenge all on its own. So I can understand and appreciate the interest in releasing intellectual property. I think the intent is right. We're almost together as a planet Earth globe. You know, we want to do what's right, but I personally, as a person that's been embedded in supply chain issues with this, competing against even the other companies for glass vials and syringes has left us in limitations, right? Now, could we solve that solution together? Yes, I think that there's a huge effort right now. You've seen the amount of doses coming up is going up exponentially because we're solving those issues. So, I mean, that's probably all I can say as a scientist, as a CMC guy. Clearly, I can't get into politics with it, you know, that's looming out there, but I do share some of your thoughts and concerns as well. So
appreciate that. Thanks, Tim. Really good presentation as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. Tim, is that okay? One more question or?
No problem.
Okay, one last question from Bob. Bob,
hey, Bob, how are you?
Good, Tim. Great presentation. I really enjoyed it. Wonderful. In relation to this remote interactive evaluation, I understand the FDA does not issue EIRs or 483s following one of these evaluations. Do you know what they're issuing instead? Are there anything they issued?
No, we're still working through that in the discussions. That's a good question, Bob, and I probably should know the answer to that, but I don't think they are definitely not issuing 483s, but they did say in that there would be observations. There could be observations issued. My guess is I think they're going to use the RIE to determine whether they can, this is me just speculating, whether they can allow for some mechanism to get them through COVID to allow for them to, you know, get a post-approval supplement approved or a waiver. If they're seeing some observation that they can't resolve, my guess is it'll result in a deferral of application or something along those lines instead of a 43. Then they'll go to the site and do the inspection. That's my own personal thought on that, Bob, but I, you know, don't know where that's going to go.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks.
The good news is for us, a lot of those lists that I had out there, before I put that table together 3 months ago, it was delay, not approval, delay, not approval. Now it is waiver accepted. We are inspecting a site. We will allow for a waiver, but we may inspect in the future. So I like to believe that there is an optimistic and a really good effort by the FDA to know that they got to move past this pandemic and break this backlog. So I commend them for that. So it's a step in the right direction, I think.
Thanks, Bob. Yep, so I think with that, we can end the presentation. I would like to thank Tim for sharing this valuable experience. Just to remind everyone that our next Technical Tuesday will be from another colleague from Pfizer, Stanley Tan. He's going to discuss about COVID vaccine supply chains experience. It will be on June 22nd, 21 at 5:30 p.m. Don't forget to register. And then I also want to share that Tim will be our keynote speaker in this coming August annual conference. Tim will be talking about global harmonization. So I would encourage everyone to register and join this coming ISP conference. So with that, I would like to thank Tim again and everyone for joining and wish him a good evening and good day for everyone. Thanks.